What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, there's a saboteur living inside your mind? A master deceiver that has been pulling the strings since before you could form your first memory. It whispers, it manipulates, it creates the illusion of choice while secretly making your decisions for you. You think you're free? You believe you're in control of your thoughts, your desires, your actions? Think again. The most dangerous prison isn't built with concrete walls and steel bars. It's constructed from invisible beliefs, unconscious patterns, and psychological blind spots that you don't even know exist. And the cruelest part? You're both the prisoner and the unwitting architect of your own mental jail. Carl Jung, one of history's most profound psychological thinkers, warned us about this internal deception decades ago. He saw how the human mind creates elaborate fantasies not to reveal truth, but to hide it, to protect us from the raw, unfiltered reality that might shatter our comfortable illusions. Your brain isn't designed to show you truth. It's designed to keep you functional, to maintain equilibrium at all costs, even if that means lying to you every second of every day. These aren't harmless white lies. They're existential deceptions that keep you trapped in patterns of self-sabotage, that prevent genuine connection with others, that stop you from becoming who you truly are. The cost? Your authentic life, your potential, your freedom. But here's where it gets interesting. Once you understand the mechanics of this deception, you can begin to see through the matrix of your own making. The very awareness of these psychological blind spots becomes the first step toward genuine liberation. Today, we're going to venture into the shadowy terrain of your own mind. We'll expose the unconscious forces that have been running your life from behind the scenes. And we'll discover Jung's roadmap for escaping this invisible prison. This isn't comfortable knowledge. It might disturb you. It might challenge everything you think you know about yourself. But as Jung himself said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Are you ready to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? To understand how your brain systematically deceives you, we need to explore Carl Jung's revolutionary model of the human psyche. But don't worry, we're going to translate these profound ideas into language that reveals their practical, everyday impact on your life. Jung proposed that the mind isn't a unified entity, but a complex system with multiple layers. At the surface level is your conscious mind, the you that you identify with. It's the thinking, rational part that believes it's in control. But beneath this conscious layer lies something far more powerful and mysterious: the unconscious mind. And this is where the real action happens. Jung divided the unconscious into two domains: the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious contains your forgotten experiences, repressed memories, and undeveloped aspects of your personality. The collective unconscious, however, is even deeper, a shared psychological inheritance containing universal patterns and instincts Jung called archetypes. Now, here's where the deception begins. Jung identified several structures within this psychic system that function as powerful internal forces, often working against your conscious intentions and best interests. First is the persona, the social mask you wear to adapt to societal expectations. Think of it as your public face, the version of yourself you present to the world. We all develop personas as necessary adaptations to our environment. The problem arises when you mistake this mask for who you truly are. Many people live their entire lives identifying with their persona, never realizing it's merely a constructed image designed for social acceptance. The real deception happens when you believe your persona is your authentic self. You wake up at 45 and wonder why success in your career feels hollow, why your relationships lack depth, why you feel disconnected from yourself. That's because you've been living as an image, not as a whole human being. But the most insidious deception comes from what Jung called The shadow. The shadow contains all the parts of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or repressed because they conflict with your self-image or social expectations. These might include negative qualities like aggression, selfishness, or laziness, but also positive traits that somehow threatened your environment, like creativity or independence. Here's the critical insight. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you've disowned it. Instead, it operates autonomously in your unconscious, sabotaging your conscious goals and intentions. It's like having an invisible adversary working against you from within. When shadow content remains unconscious, it gets projected onto others. You see in other people the very qualities you've repressed in yourself. That colleague who enrages you with their arrogance, that friend whose neediness exhausts you. Look closer. You're likely encountering aspects of your own disowned self. Jung warned that this unconscious projection mechanism doesn't just damage personal relationships, it has catastrophic societal implications. The most destructive political movements in history have succeeded by exploiting collective shadow projection, redirecting disowned aggression and fear toward convenient scapegoats. Another form of internal deception comes from the anima, tos or animus, the contrasexual archetypes representing your unconscious feminine or masculine energies. When these remain unconscious, they distort your relationships, particularly romantic ones, leading you to seek external fulfillment for what's actually an internal need for wholeness. Think about it. How many relationships fail because people expect their partners to complete them or fulfill unrealistic archetypal expectations? That's not love, it's unconscious projection. Jung's concept of complexes further explains how your brain deceives you. Complexes are emotionally charged clusters of ideas and memories that form around archetypal cores. When triggered, a complex temporarily takes over your personality, making you react in ways disconnected from your conscious intentions. That argument where you suddenly became your mother? That rejection that plunged you into disproportionate despair? Those were complexes hijacking your consciousness. These unconscious forces, the shadow, the persona, the anima, animus, and complexes, operate like independent sub-personalities within your psyche. And here's the terrifying part. They often have more control over your life than your conscious self does. Your conscious mind, rather than directing your life, often merely rationalizes decisions already made unconsciously. You think you chose that career path, that partner, that lifestyle? Look deeper. These choices likely emerged from unconscious patterns established long before you had the capacity for conscious decision-making. Jung called this phenomenon psychic determinism, the principle that nothing in your mental life happens by chance. Every thought, feeling, and behavior has unconscious determinants that your conscious mind doesn't recognize. The ultimate deception is the illusion of conscious control itself. Your brain creates a narrative that you're the author of your life story, when often you're more like a character being written by unconscious forces you don't perceive or understand. But Jung wasn't a pessimist. He offered a path forward through what he called individuation, the lifelong process of integrating unconscious content into consciousness, becoming a more whole and authentic person. This doesn't mean eliminating the unconscious, impossible, but establishing a more balanced relationship with it. Individuation requires confronting your shadow, recognizing projections, differentiating from your persona, and integrating the full spectrum of your archetypal potential. It demands radical honesty with yourself about who you really are, not who you wish you were, or who others expect you to be. This process isn't comfortable. It means acknowledging your capacity for behaviors and emotions you've spent a lifetime denying. It means taking responsibility for the projections you've cast onto others. It means recognizing that many of your cherished beliefs about yourself are defensive fictions. But the alternative to this difficult work? Continuing to live in unconscious reaction mode, a puppet of forces you refuse to acknowledge, wondering why authentic happiness and meaningful connection remain elusive despite your best efforts. Let's move from theory to practice. How do Jung's insights about psychic deception manifest in your everyday reality? The examples are everywhere once you know what to look for. Consider the realm of work and career. Our culture celebrates the driven professional who sacrifices everything for success. But Jung would see this differently. He'd point to the person who works 80-hour weeks, neglecting health and relationships, claiming it's for financial security or professional fulfillment. The conscious narrative seems rational. I'm building a future. The unconscious reality? Often this person is living through their persona, desperately seeking external validation, or running from inner emptiness they can't bear to face. I once worked with a high-powered attorney who couldn't understand why her achievements left her feeling hollow. Through exploration, she discovered her drive wasn't authentic, but a complex formed around her father's conditional love. Her unconscious equated achievement with worthiness. No amount of professional success could satisfy this complex because it wasn't actually about career. It was about an unresolved childhood wound her conscious mind had completely rationalized. Social media provides a perfect laboratory for observing Jung's concepts in action. Consider the carefully curated Instagram feed. Jung would recognize this as the digital persona, not just a representation of self, but often a compensation for what's lacking internally. The person posting relentlessly about their perfect relationship? Look closer. Frequently, it's precisely when relationships are struggling that the public displays of affection intensify. The unconscious compensates for the inner lack by strengthening the outer image. More disturbing is how social media algorithms exploit our unconscious complexes. They track what triggers emotional reactions, outrage, insecurity, desire, fear, and feed us more of the same, creating hermetically sealed reality bubbles that confirm our projections. Your newsfeed isn't neutral. It's a mirror of your unconscious biases, amplified and reinforced. The technology literally weaponizes your shadow against you. Consumer culture operates through similar mechanisms. Marketing doesn't sell products. It sells archetypal fulfillment. That luxury car commercial isn't promoting transportation. It's activating your hero archetype, promising power and recognition. The perfume ad isn't selling scent. It's promising connection to your anima, butch, animus energies. Corporations have become expert shadow psychologists, linking products to unconscious needs while keeping you unaware of the psychological manipulation at work. Even our political polarization reflects Jung's warning about shadow projection. Notice how each side of the political spectrum sees the other not just as mistaken, but as embodiments of evil or stupidity. This isn't rational disagreement. It's collective shadow projection. The qualities we most despise in our political opponents are often disowned aspects of our own ideological shadow. A shocking example. Studies show that those most vocally condemning specific moral failings, like corruption or sexual misconduct, are statistically more likely to engage in those very behaviors. The shadow always tells on itself through the intensity of projection. Relationships provide perhaps the clearest window into unconscious deception. Consider the phenomenon of repeatedly choosing partners who ultimately disappoint you in the same way. Your conscious mind says, "I'm just unlucky in love." Jung would identify this as a complex at work, an unconscious pattern seeking repetition, not resolution. Or think about those heated arguments with loved ones where you become unrecognizable to yourself, disproportionately angry, defensive, or wounded. In Jungian terms, you've been triggered into a complex, temporarily possessed by an autonomous fragment of your unconscious. Your rational mind is offline, replaced by a reactive pattern established decades ago. The most insidious relationship deception involves romantic projection. Jung observed that we fall in love not with actual people, but with our anima ach animus projections cast onto them. The intoxicating feeling of having found your other half often signals not authentic connection, but unconscious projection of your own undeveloped potentials. When the projection inevitably fails, no human can permanently carry your projection, disillusionment follows. The unconscious deception was mistaking an internal need for integration as an external need for the perfect partner. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. The rational woman who's inexplicably drawn to emotionally unavailable men. The sensitive man who keeps choosing controlling partners. Jung would see these not as bad luck, but as unconscious patterns seeking external resolution for internal imbalances. Even our bodies reveal unconscious deceptions. Psychosomatic symptoms often represent shadow content-seeking expression. The migraine that mysteriously appears when you need to confront someone, the digestive issues that flare during periods of repressed anger. These aren't just physical phenomena, but somatic communications from your unconscious, expressing what your conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. One particularly troubling manifestation of Jung's shadow concept appears in what he called enantiodromia, the principle that anything pushed to an extreme eventually becomes its opposite. The moral crusader who falls spectacularly from grace, the anti-corruption politician caught in scandal, the faithful spouse who suddenly has an affair. These aren't simple hypocrisies, but examples of unconscious compensation. What's consciously suppressed doesn't disappear. It builds energy in the unconscious until it erupts, often destructively. Even spirituality isn't immune to unconscious deception. Jung observed how often spiritual seeking becomes an escape from psychological integration. The person pursuing enlightenment while their personal relationships are in shambles isn't advancing spiritually. They're using spiritual concepts to bypass psychological work. Jung called this spiritual inflation, using transcendent ideas to avoid confronting the shadow. Perhaps most disturbing is how unconscious forces drive addictive behaviors. The substance abuser, the compulsive gambler, the digital addict, all can articulate rational reasons for their choices. But Jung would identify these as conscious rationalizations for unconscious patterns. Addiction often represents a misguided attempt at self-medication for psychic pain the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. This doesn't mean you lack responsibility for these patterns. Quite the opposite. Jung's message is that true responsibility begins with recognizing the unconscious determinants of your choices. Only then can you begin the work of integration that leads to authentic freedom. We've ventured through the labyrinth of the unconscious mind, exposing the mechanisms through which your brain systematically deceives you. But understanding these deceptions is only the beginning. What matters now is what you do with this knowledge. Jung's warning isn't meant to demoralize, but to awaken. The first step toward freedom is recognizing the nature of your imprisonment. By becoming aware of how your unconscious shapes your reality, you gain the possibility of choice, where before there was only automatic reaction. This journey toward psychological integration isn't easy. It requires courage to face your shadow, to own your projections, to question your most cherished self-concepts. It demands the humility to acknowledge that you aren't who you thought you were, and that many of your choices weren't choices at all, but unconscious patterns playing out through you. But consider the alternative. To remain unconscious is to remain unfree, to continue living a life directed by forces you neither perceive nor understand. It means perpetuating the same patterns, making the same mistakes, experiencing the same disappointments, and never understanding why. As Jung himself put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The process begins with simple but profound self-inquiry. The next time you feel disproportionately triggered by someone, ask yourself, what quality in this person am I reacting to? Is this possibly a disowned aspect of myself? The next time you find yourself in a familiar, painful situation, wonder, how might I be unconsciously creating this outcome? What pattern is seeking repetition here? Pay attention to your dreams. Jung saw dreams not as random neural firings, but as communications from the unconscious, often compensating for conscious attitudes that have become too one-sided. The recurring dream, the nightmare, the vivid symbolic scenario, these aren't meaningless. They're messages from parts of yourself seeking integration. Examine your projections, positive and negative. Who do you idealize? Who do you demonize? Both extremes often indicate shadow material. The qualities you most admire in others may be your own undeveloped potential. The traits you most despise often reflect disowned aspects of yourself. Question your persona. Are you living authentically or performing a role? Do you know the difference between who you are and the image you present? Many never ask these questions, spending decades perfecting a social mask, while the authentic self remains undeveloped. Confront your complexes. Notice when you're triggered into disproportionate emotional reactions. These emotional hotspots aren't random. They're entry points to unconscious material seeking integration. Each triggered moment is an opportunity for growth if you have the courage to explore rather than react. This work isn't just personal, it's profoundly social. Jung believed that unconscious individuals create unconscious societies. The political extremism, tribal thinking, and collective shadow projection threatening our world today aren't separate from individual psychology. They're its macrocosmic expression. By doing your own shadow work, by integrating your own projections, you contribute to collective healing. As Jung noted, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Your individual journey toward consciousness has implications far beyond your personal development. This path isn't about achieving perfection. Integration doesn't mean eliminating the unconscious, an impossible task, but establishing a more conscious relationship with it. Success isn't measured by the absence of unconscious influence, but by your growing capacity to recognize and relate to these forces, rather than being blindly driven by them. The reward for this difficult work? Authentic freedom. Not the illusory freedom of unconscious reaction that feels like choice, but the genuine freedom that comes from expanded awareness. With each aspect of the unconscious you integrate, you gain psychological territory previously controlled by autonomous complexes. You become more whole, more present, more capable of genuine connection with others. So I challenge you. Wake up. Question everything, especially what you think you know about yourself. Break the trance of unconscious identification. Recognize the shadow material you've been projecting onto others and take responsibility for it. Differentiate from the roles you've been playing and discover who you actually are beneath the social masks. This is the hero's journey of our time, not an external quest, but an internal one. The monster to be slain isn't out there. It's the unconscious patterns that have been running your life without your awareness or consent. The cave you fear to enter, as Joseph Campbell said, holds the treasure you seek. That cave is your own shadow, and the treasure is nothing less than your authentic self, waiting to be reclaimed from the unconscious forces that have kept it captive. The choice is yours. Continue living under the influence of unconscious deception, or embark on the challenging but infinitely rewarding path of integration. As Jung reminds us, Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. The time for awakening is now.